Today, I would like to discuss with you workplace culture. I would like to take a minute to paint a picture. Think about the amount of time you spend at home. Think about the amount of time you spend with your family, with your friends. How do you feel when you spend that time with your loved ones? Now, if you're a full-time employee, think about the amount of time you spend at work, the amount of overtime you spend at work, the times you had to bring work home. How many times has work impacted your life, personal life, or your mental health? If you're thinking about these questions and there are negative feelings associated with your answers, you're not alone. As of September of this year, it is reported that 131.7 million Americans work a full-time job. Out of that number, 87% of the population are not passionate about their jobs. 60% say their job is causing insomnia, and 80% are not satisfied with where they work. According to Jessica Price Jones, the author of Happiness at Work, the average American spends 90,000 hours at work in a lifetime. That's equivalent to about a decade, 10 years of life interacting in a certain social environment. Social psychology is focused on social environments and group interactions. It looks at how they impact our attitudes and behavior. It takes anywhere from 2 to 8 months to form a habit, steady behavior, or attitude. Out of those 2 to 8 months, on average, you're spending about 9 years of practicing that attitude. Now that your attitude becomes established, it is something that is a part of you, and you take you everywhere you go, right? Here's the point. The kind of social environment that you spend in every day is something that affects you not just at work, but also in your personal life. For example, disorganization at work could lead to disorganization at home. This occurs to environments that are good or bad. But the social issue that I would like to focus on is poor workplace culture and how it affects us personally as well as how it affects the business you are working at. In this presentation, 4 questions will be answered to help explain this problem and how we solve it. I will define what workplace culture is and the aspects as well as social theories that contribute to the culture. I will explain why it is important to understand these aspects and who all is involved, followed by learning how we can use these tools in a positive way to help business growth as well as personal. Defining workplace culture. Workplace culture is basically the character and personality of your organization. It's what it's what makes up your uniqueness of your business. And it involves all people's personalities and behaviors as well as attitudes. Within this culture, there are 3 main aspects that impact how the company or individual fails or succeeds. The first aspect is leadership, then there's communication, and finally the company's core values. Within leadership, there are 4 different kinds of leadership styles. The company management gears towards that represent the company as a whole. The first leadership style is authoritarian. This is when the leader focuses more on controlling everything about certain situations and micromanages their employees. The second style is democratic, where the leader encourages input from everyone on the team in solving a problem. Laissez-faire leadership involves very little engagement from the supervisor as far as authority is concerned, and there isn't much structure in solving a problem. And finally, bureaucratic, which is fairly new, developed style where the leader is only focused on rules and regulations, doesn't have much innovation or creativity, and isn't personable with their team. They focus on achieving high numbers for financial growth only. In a case study done by Stephanie Kelly and Patrick McDonald, a research was done regarding supervisor-subordinate solidarity. In Luhmann's terms, it refers to the relationship a boss has with their employees and how trusting and communicative they are to one another. The hypothesis was that leadership styles and solidarity correlate with job satisfaction and burnout. The snowball sampling research method was used, which is when participants recruit other participants to join in the study. A 15-minute survey was conducted where the supervisor-subordinate solidarity model was used to measure the results. There were a total of 340 participants who worked with their employer for a minimum of 4 years, with job descriptions from starting at sales to non-labor farming. It was concluded that democratic leadership style had a higher job satisfaction and low burnout compared to authoritarian style, which results in low job satisfaction and high burnout. So the way that all of this ties in has to do with Bandura's social theory. According to Albert Bandura, who developed the social learning theory, suggests that essentially people learn by doing what others do. In the case of this example where a mother is talking on her phone and showing some aggressive tone to whoever's on the other line and threatening them, all the while she is at her son's school and the principal is explaining their concern because her son gave someone a black eye, but the mother has no idea where this behavior is coming from. In the case of this example, the theoretical perspective here is transmission of aggression. Transmission of aggression is primarily when a child learns aggressive behavior from a parent or authority figure and behaves in an antisocial manner in front of that model. The same thing could be applied in a workplace environment where the authority shows certain behavior and employees adopt the same kind of behavior or attitude. Communication. This can be perceived in many different ways. However, we want to take a look at the impact that interpersonal communication has and what happens when it's lacking in the workplace. Interpersonal refers to communicating face-to-face to solve a problem at hand or to disclose important information that is essential to know. Interpersonal communication is also a way for colleagues and coworkers to get to know one another and develop trust and respect. It helps to bring down the barrier and it makes it easier to share information that will benefit the company as well as create a stronger team. There are a few elements of interpersonal communication that are important to know. The first thing you want to know about it is that you want to communicate in a way that is respectful. It's all about what you say, it's all about how you say it, not about what you say. When communicating to another coworker, whether it be an employee or a manager, the tone that you use when communicating makes a big difference. The tone in your voice conveys the attitude you have toward the individual. In order for there to be mutual respect, one would be sure to show that by speaking respectfully to someone and expecting the action to be reciprocated. Dr. Albert Mehrabian, a professor emeritus of psychology at UCLA, researched on nonverbal communication and what elements it's made of. His studies found that only 7% of communication is verbal and that 93% of communication is nonverbal. And from that nonverbal communication, 55% of it is body language and the other 38% is tone of voice. In addition, there's active listening, which involves nodding one's head in affirmation or shaking head in non-compliance, giving feedback to clarify whether or not you received the message and you understood it, and being aware of the context or the environment of the conversation. All play a role in the success or failure of interpersonal communication. Values in the workplace can be summed up. From this information, you can infer that effects of negative and interpersonal communication, for example, yelling or talking down to employees, would have quite an impact on their attitudes, not just about the communication, but about the company's values as well. Values in the workplace can be summed up in the mission or the vision of the company, what they have for the employees, the consumers, and the company itself. What does the business believe in and stand for throughout everything that is represented by it? And are the right people in place to drive success of the company's mission? This aspect of workplace culture gives the public a sense of what the company's purpose is, as well as their ethical integrity and giving insight on the kind of people that associate with the company, internally and externally. This is where social influence comes into play. Social influence involves conformity, which is when one matches the behavior of another; compliance, where an individual agrees to go along with a request; and obedience, where an individual feels that they have no choice but to give in to demands of a person who is in charge. In the workplace, it the workplace can correlate with and impact the overall social culture of a company, which includes everything discussed from leadership to values. In a poor work culture, negative influence such as gossiping, bullying, practicing unethical habits, and ineffective leadership styles all bring life to an unhappy work environment, which then leads to stress and burnout, as well as incorporating these attitudes in your daily personal life. When social influences strongly affects an individual's social I- When social influences strongly affects an individual, social identity theory comes into play, which is where the organization you work for completely defines you and your values and beliefs become stronger in compliance to the company you work for. Overall, industrial psychologists would be a suitable fit for addressing this issue. And when determining whether or not your environment promotes a positive workplace culture, consider these three aspects of your workplace and decide how you want to spend your 90,000 hours.